Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Climbing Sycamores podcast, where we look at today's topics to get a better view of Christianity. I'm Annie Beege, and I'm joined by my friends Ben Sadler and Matt Harbach. Welcome.
Annie asked the question, does Ben have dementia? Sometimes I feel like I have dementia.
I do too.
Like, there's some things I can remember and some things that are very important. It's not even, there's no file to even look for up there.
Yeah.
It's nothing.
No, I agree.
Sometimes when I go to his office, he just starts angrily throwing things at me. Doesn't remember who I am.
Doesn't know why, or
Don't know where I am.
feel like he's an intruder. I mean, well, he is. But
Yeah.
Did you want to make your public service announcement?
Oh, yes, we can do that now. I'll try to remember at the end, too. If you, as a listener, are a fan of our content here, feel free to write us a review, to share, or to like it, or however
Send an email, or could they send us an email, or what do you...
Yeah, well, so you can send us an email always to give us feedback or to ask us questions, but just to help get our podcast out there, you can leave it.
Even if they're not
review.
a fan, I mean, sometimes anger works too, right?
Well,
if they don't like it,
like your mother always said, if you don't have anything nice to say, just keep your mouth
Say it
shut,
anyway.
You know? Different mom. Different moms.
mom. Yeah. Also, another public service announcement. If you are listening and you have like mental health issues and you need somebody to talk to, I mean, send us an email or something,
Yes.
because it's just, I'm hearing stories. Things are getting crazy. Just when you
Yeah.
think it can't get any worse, it's like, what?
I haven't told too many people. You guys know this. I'm starting classes next week at Bethany online for Christian counseling, because that's something that I want to know, what does my biblical training say that's helpful? But sometimes we think what we're saying is helpful, and I just want to know what is actually helpful for people who, because I think mental health is a huge issue, and sometimes we have really good theologians who are really bad at counseling, and sometimes we have really good counselors who say some really bad theology. So
Yeah. That's
so
good. You're going to be great at that. You are literally going to be so good.
So I've been thinking about that a
Looking
lot.
forward to having you as a resource. Not that you don't already counsel us like every week here on the podcast, but So today we wanted to do a continuation of what we did last week, and just a recap. There was an article on my homepage, MSN, that was 15 shockingly honest confessions. What ruined religion for you? Written by Elizabeth Irvin. This was an article that was taken from the website Sober Healing, which has resources for addiction and spirituality and things like that. So there were 15 headlines, and we wanted to address 6 of them. We got to 3 of them last week. And so the 3 we talked about last week were inappropriate letter, religious people, and the non-answers. And today we're going to tackle the treatment of women, sir, you need to leave, and only one is correct. So I can read the description, and then we can
Yeah, which one are we going to start with?
Treatment of women,
Okay.
I think.
Treatment of women.
All right. So according to Elizabeth Irvin, and again, she grabbed these anecdotal pieces from kind of a community support or community website or group where people were trading stories about their experiences. And so this is where some of this comes from. Okay. So the treatment of women. A woman states that she turned away from religion after her pastor ranted about the evils of women, saying that Satan walks among us in the body of every female and men must take measures against them. Others agree that women are less important, Others agree that women are less than in most churches and all religions. I mean, Eve,
That guy, he just got stood up on a date like the night before.
there.
He threw out his sermon and he went off.
Somebody's got to stop him. It's like, all right, you had a rough night.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody else can preach today.
And we might draw that from Eve, right? Being the one who gave Adam.
I do know historically that the Catholic Church did tend to overly demonize women because they got a lot of writings from St. Augustine, who St. Augustine really struggled with women, Sixth Commandment, everything included there.
Oh.
And so he would often write about his struggles, and he wasn't necessarily attacking women, but a lot of like a lot of church fathers would like seize on that and be like, oh, women are the problem. And that wasn't really his point, but oftentimes like in old like medieval paintings, like the devil is depicted as female,
Wow.
but still with like horns and like the tail and the, you know, the dragon looking.
I mean,
thing,
I'll admit, I get it. Kind of.
Only you could say that, right?
I know, yeah. You guys better not
if we say
I
that.
but
Some
you're
things you can't
agreeing in
say.
your head.
This is a huge topic, and I think one that I'm thinking about more and more for many different reasons. I'm in the middle of reading a fantastic book, How Not to Read the Bible by Dan Kimball, and it's so good. It kind of goes after a lot of these people's arguments against Christianity and how they maybe cherry pick the Bible and read a verse like women must remain silent or those kinds of things. And you read this in the Bible and you think, yeah, the Bible seems to be against women or demeaning of women. And so the church and sometimes has followed that. And so the point he makes in the book, and I really like, is to look at the whole Bible as this arc, this story, where in the beginning, both men and women are created in the image of God. And how only Christianity, only the Bible begins like that. You don't see that in any other religion. And then it's after the fall into sin, we realize that there is a consequence of sin. It says that a woman, what does it say? Yeah, your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you. And that is not the way it was supposed to be. This is the consequence of sin. Like, you're going to see this in the world, and how often this is not a command. This is not the ideal. This is when you look out in the world. This is what we see. That very often men use either their physical strength or whatever to oppress and take advantage of women. And unfortunately, that can also happen inside of the church. So that's the non-ideal state. Obviously, it's a sinful state of where the world is at. And God is about putting the world back right again. And what we see in the Bible is not the demeaning of women, but the exaltation of women. In the Old Testament, it'd be like judges like Deborah and other prophetess and leaders in the Old Testament. In the New Testament, Jesus' closest followers were women. They actually, his whole ministry was funded by rich women, basically, who funded his ministry. And then the first people to see him resurrected were women, and that's pretty amazing because in ancient Greek and Roman culture, women's testimony weren't seen as valid in court. And then in the New Testament, Paul is working side by side with women. There were prophetess that prophesied what would be happening in his ministry. Lydia was a major player, and Phoebe also in the early Christian church. So I think we've misunderstood sometimes some biblical passages on women, not looking at the whole overarching message. And I think Victory's doing an okay job. The reality is, wherever the Bible has reached, new places, new cultures, new continents, the roles and the rights of women have gone up every time. Unfortunately, sometimes over time, people use the Bible as a weapon and to demean women. So I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, I think, in our synod, and we've touched on this on the podcast before, I think, in the early days of our podcast, but in our synod with regard to voting on church matters, and I think, I think that, so in other words, like in our synod, sometimes when the congregation is put to a vote, it's like the man of the family, he's the one who gets to speak on behalf of the family. And that's, assuming that you have this, typical family of, husband and wife and kids. Well, they don't, what if you're a single mother? What if your husband has died? What if your husband doesn't go to church and you're the wife and you're the spiritual head of the household and you're dragging your husband to church so you don't get a vote?
Yeah.
I
think the other thing too, a lot of our church politics started after our country and and run like a democracy. So we have voting, and our church actually doesn't do that really. But
Victory, right?
yeah, Victory doesn't. But our church body, in many of the churches, set it up like that, where you have a congregational vote. The problem is, there was a time where women weren't allowed to vote in the United States for the next president or, for elections, right? And then it was like a big deal for women's suffrage. And now our church body has still kind of seen that as a role of authority, that voting is a role of authority, which I don't think anybody thinks that way. So different people interpret the roles of men and women different ways in Scripture, and they kind of draw the line that God has called men to take the role of headship in the family and in the church. I guess the thing that I'm learning more and more, like, what does that look like practically? And is that exactly... We say that's a principle, but our churches keep on changing what that actually looks like. And is that really how Paul led the early Christian churches when he's asking Phoebe to deliver this letter to the church? And I'm just wondering if Phoebe's reading that letter in front of the whole congregation. And what really gets me upset is when women are silenced, especially in abusive relationships, because they don't have a voice, and then the man can be on leadership or be on elders, and he kind of can keep his wife silent, and it becomes abusive. So that's what really, I think we need to hear a more female voice, especially in those situations. So I'm just learning more and more about it. I'm thinking more and more about it. I'm trying to see, what does the Bible actually say, and what does it actually teach? And is there a clear principle that we have to use in every situation? And I think that one on voting, like culturally, even if you do believe in a headship principle, nobody sees voting as a role of authority anymore.
No, it's a drag.
Yeah, it's actually a burden sometimes, right?
Voting's a burden. Women, you can have it.
Yeah. So I think another issue too is very often men are not leading in a servant leader kind of format. Men are being oppressive or demeaning. I think that is another issue.
I think a lot of men are just not stepping up to the plate.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think at our church, I think there's like, it seems like the women take a lot of volunteer opportunities, and they are leading a lot of like our events and things. I don't know. I can't speak for every church, but it seems like women are often the ones, I guess we've talked about this, that women are often the ones like bringing the kids to church on Sundays.
Yeah.
And the men are either getting dragged along or not coming with.
I think that's been kind of the history of the Christian church. Women have taken the role and have been more open to getting help or serving or being connected to their faith. It's interesting. I think that's why you see, statistically, we were talking about mental health earlier, a higher mental health crisis among men, and alcoholism and things like that. Higher numbers among men is because they don't seek out necessarily, usually, those support systems in the Christian church, and it's hard to be vulnerable and be open to help and encouragement. So, yeah, I think it can be a caricature of the church to see, but there are pastors out there, I think, who do demean women and don't see their value. And it was very much part of the ancient Greek and even Jewish and Roman culture. And I don't think that's how that's not the ideal of Eden that we're looking to bring our world about. Yeah.
It seems like there's not a lot of instructions left in the book of like Acts, for example, or the epistles. Like, there's not a lot of instructions on like how to properly run a church. And I think that's good because it means it can adapt over time. It seems weird to me that if a church's mission is to kind of spread the gospel in its community, that you would say it is sinful for a woman to take some role of leadership in that.
Right. I think there's different leaders who interpret, especially like 1 Timothy chapter 2, where it says, a woman must remain silent. And
Best verse.
I think not.
And there's many
kick
different,
you.
that's one verse. And many people look at, so there's different ways to understand that verse. And what Dan Kimball is saying, his perspective and what many people have said is that Paul is speaking specifically to a situation that Timothy has to speak to. We have to realize that the Bible it's written for us, but it wasn't written to us. And so these letters that he's writing to Timothy, he's writing about a specific situation. And in this congregation, was there a group of women who are usurping their authority and kind of being oppressive with it? And there was a specific situation that Paul is trying to address. That's what many have interpreted, especially when you look at the whole overall scope from Genesis 1 about men and women being equal. Maybe they do, they have different roles and different strengths and different things that they're bringing to the table, but then also how Paul himself led the church. That at the end of like the book, his letter to the Romans, he's got this long list of people that he's thankful for. And in that list, he calls many of the women his co-laborers, who worked with him. And so, and the first gospel preachers were women when they saw the resurrected Jesus. So I don't know, I'm trying to read the Bible carefully and try to understand it historically and be, to speak it accurately. And I just wonder sometimes we look at passages and are a bit more arbitrary on which ones we emphasize.
I think it's kind of like, I just feel like we're in this weird in between where, like, so for anyone who doesn't know, in our synod, women are not pastors. But like, if Annie worked at a different job, guess what her job title would be? Worship pastor.
Right.
Oh yeah, and I don't need that.
Right.
I don't want
It's
it.
like as long as we don't call you that, we're getting away with it. Getting away from whom? God.
Yeah.
Is he out there like, you're breaking my rule, or is he like, not a big deal?
Right. And I think I guess that's what I'm trying to understand. Like, what is the principle? And some people have very clear lines in their head, and I almost envy some of these Christians who have these such clear lines, like this is right, this is wrong. I just have never been able to do that. Mm-mm. And there was a time where in our church body, like, dancing is wrong. Like, this is wrong. We cannot do this.
Go back to that.
What, dancing during worship?
Dancing is wrong.
No. Did you, like, in many Christian churches, and in some still today, I think in some very conservative Pentecostal groups, it is seen as sinful to like go to to dance like at a prom.
It's a vertical expression of a horizontal desire.
And so, but we've kind of moved on to say, like, that's not really what happens. Go to a dance, and now our church and our schools have dances. And so I there was a time where I don't think we would let a woman play the organ or lead, play an instrument, because now she's leading worship and in a place of leadership. And now we're kind of looking at that like, that's not what the Bible is saying, and that's not how Paul ran his churches, and that's not how Jesus ran his ministry. And so sometimes I think we take this one passage and we make all these rules, and these rules just don't
align with the rest of the Bible, right?
Right. They don't align with Bible, and they don't stand the test of time. Like, you make this rule, and in 30 years, strong Bible-believing Christians will look at that rule and say, why did we make that rule? That's not what the Bible is actually saying.
I think on the other hand, like, I feel like there is a stronger urge for men to take roles of leadership than there is for women to not take roles of leadership.
Yeah, okay.
What, that men have a proclivity to do that, or what? What do you mean?
I'm thinking of I'm thinking of husbands, love your wives, like Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a lot harder than wives submitting to your husbands.
Yeah, I
You know?
like.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Giving
there's
up your life. Yeah.
Yeah.
and respecting her as the weaker partner. Like I feel like there's a stronger precedent for men. You should be stepping up and taking.
Mhm.
You know, you're the first one to sacrifice. You're the first one to forgive. You're
Right.
the first one.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as a way to take a role of leadership in the family.
Right.
But it just seems like there's not a lot that says women shouldn't. It's more like men should.
Correct. Yeah, and I think, and if you understand leadership, meaning you're going to lay your life down for your family. You know, when the Titanic was sinking, it was the men said women and children first. They were laying down their life for their
And
families.
Jack let Rose on the door in the ocean.
and
he
they
died.
held on.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, yeah, there is a desire for men to lead, although I've seen, you know, like Deborah in the book of Judges is an incredible leader. And she almost did it reluctantly, like saying, hey, men, you should be stepping up. That's kind of how the Bible portrays
Yeah.
it. I guess when I'm just responding to this
Sure.
point that you brought up about you know, the treatment of women, and I guess all I'm saying is, yeah, sometimes I think we've taken Bible passages and weaponized them to keep women silent and not like you were saying, laying down your life for them and listening to them and letting them in the areas that and yeah, I know, treating women as equals the way the Bible says in the very first page. And after the fall, that was distorted in every culture throughout the world, throughout history. And I think it's our job as resurrection believing people who are looking forward to the renewed world to do what we can to try to experience that kind of Eden-like equality, I guess.
So you're saying we should not fire Annie?
No, I think we should keep her.
Thanks, Ben.
All right. Okay.
I
All
don't
right.
like you, Matt.
I think that's a good example of, you know, wanting to hear, you know, Annie, you are leading the ministry and leading the music and leading that side of worship now. And, you know, when it comes to that side of the worship service, you know, I want to defer to you and like, what is best? What would sound best? What is the best group of musicians up there for this Sunday? And I don't know if that would have been the way it was 50 years ago in the church. And I think it's because maybe we distorted some passages.
Or also because, yeah, like, you know, the culture at the time is, you know, maybe I have the experience, I think, to do the things you just mentioned.
Yeah.
Because I've been doing this for so long in other, you know, other areas. So maybe just women didn't have the experience at the time because they weren't allowed the opportunity to have the experience. You know what I'm saying? So that when the time came time for them to maybe have an opportunity to lead, they didn't have the experience to be able to do so because they had been oppressed culturally. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Sure.
So
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree with that. All right. Is that enough for that topic?
Sure.
So, okay. Next topic is titled, Sir, You Need to Leave. And the explanation is this. A former churchgoer admits his final straw was his church asking a homeless man to leave and not come back. He sat and listened to the sermons without bothering anyone and always sat in the back. This commenter says they confronted the youth group leader and she defended the preacher.
I feel like this one's pretty easy. I feel like if that's true, then yeah, that's not a church I would want to go to.
Okay,
either.
but I agree. But here were some thoughts that I had because, okay, what if the homeless man was, I mean, just I'm just gonna say it, really like foul smelling and like was really a distraction to others.
Well, it says in there like did not bother anybody, so I'm assuming.
Yeah, but how do you know? I mean,
That's what I'm saying.
You know,
like I'm just taking it for its word.
yeah, no, I
you
agree.
know.
But I'm thinking of other instances, where without bothering anyone, I feel like
Yeah, I don't. we have a safety team here, and if somebody's being disruptive, no matter what they look like or smell like or whatever,
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes.
I know. Ben just pointed at Matt.
But I think, for their safety and for disruptive, but the Christian church should be kind of messy, right? And that's what offended so many people in Jesus' ministry, was that they said, he's willing to hang out with these people that society we all call dirty. And so it's too bad, because I could see that if we think the church is about well put together people, and it's a museum of saints, and we all come here on our Sunday's best, that's not what the church looked like for Jesus.
Can you think of any justification, like we see this statement, this explanation at face value, and we're like, this is absurd. Why on earth would this happen?
I doubt that that's the whole story.
No, that's my
honest
point. And so I'm saying, can you think of any, behind the scenes reason, this is a former churchgoer, admits that his final straw was when the homeless man was asked to leave.
I know one person I worked on the south side of Milwaukee when I was at seminary, and there was some guy who he was homeless, but he was also had this beef with the pastor. And he literally came down the aisle, took a bag of urine, and threw it at the pastor. So if somebody's like mentally
warranted.
ill and
Yes.
and they're doing something,
That would be bothering someone.
Yeah,
This says
that's
without bothering anyone.
Yeah.
So I can't help but
You
think.
shouldn't have given me that idea.
Watch out, Ben.
what?
Bring your umbrella.
So
Poncho.
that was a crazy day. Didn't happen to me, but that pastor, he did what he had to do. But so what we usually do here, and our safety team is so good, they usually sit by a person, if there's somebody that we're concerned that, has caused issues in the past, they just sit by them. And, if they're, mentally ill or have these things and for the most part, I mean, that's the reality, is that people can't help it. They can't help it. So how can we help people get the help they need? And look at them and ask. I just got done reading a great book. It was called, do I say that?
I'm going to put that on your on your epitaph.
What Happened to You was the title of the book. And I was surprised how good it was. It was Oprah Winfrey's psychologist, and she's interviewing him. And he says, we need to change the question from what's wrong with you to what happened to you. And I thought that was really powerful, because you just wonder, what were all the dominoes that had to fall for this person to get to that spot in their life? And how can we make sure that they don't keep going down that direction? So,
I guess, with regard to this person's experience, one of two things is happening with this. The first thing is that literally the preacher and the church leadership is so completely out of order.
Yeah.
Or there's something else going on that you might not know about, that
Right.
that there really actually is a problem,
Yeah.
and that the person might have been talked to. And, so really, I mean, I think,
That's what I think too.
And what would sometimes will happen is, if somebody is causing problems in one church, they'll start hitting up other churches, asking for money or having, other issues or causing disruptions. And so sometimes pastors will call around and say, all right, this person keeps coming into our service, or this person keeps coming and,
Flinging Pete.
have you seen them, or do you know what's going on? And it's, and so that could be going on as well. So you do want to, it's okay for everybody to feel uncomfortable to be in a congregation that is messy, and there are people who look different, sound different, get paid different than you do. I think that's what Jesus wants, is a church that is diverse in all the different ways you can think of. But I think I can't imagine if somebody's not being disruptive that you ask them to leave just because whatever. Yeah.
either that or they're just really out of order. And that goes back to, okay, well, if that really is the case, where it's church leadership that is just really that out of order, not all churches are like that.
Right.
That's not supposed to happen.
I can't think of a pastor that I know who would do that.
No.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Onward.
Yeah.
Okay.
Onward.
Final one. Only one is correct, and the description is: There are multiple religions, but being taught that only one is correct made this user turn away. Numerous others stood by this reasoning, stating there are thousands of religions before one said, I am a Hindu, and within Hinduism, we have 330 million gods here to choose from.
Okay, so I have a couple thoughts on this. First of all,
Sounds
330 million.
exhausting.
How are you even
I can't
keeping
even
all
count
this
that
straight?
high.
That's more people than live in this country.
Right.
So first of all, does only one religion have to be correct? I guess not. But if they're contradicting each other, you can't say they're all right. You know, there's an argument some people will say, like, I think every religious person is ultimately like looking at the same God. Like there's different versions from different cultures, but they're all pointing at the same thing. And I think that's half true. I think if people have a natural knowledge of God, then if they're doing his will, like if they're living in a way according to his will, then they're going to find that that's a better way to live. Ultimately, they're going to find things like you shall not steal and be like, hey, this is a great rule, you know, and you
Hard
shall
to get
not.
better than the golden rule, right?
Yeah.
And many religions talk about that. Yeah.
Right. And so it's like, yeah, that's true. And you might think that was your God's vision or someone else's God's, but it's like, you know, that's just pointing to the fact that, you know, if there is a true God who does have that rule, then it's a good rule,
Yeah.
you know, and it doesn't matter if you call yourself Christian. You know, things like adultery is harmful and murder is harmful. And so yes, there are things that are pointing everyone to a God. But then to say you have to pick one, well, that can't be right, because how can you say one's better than the other? Well, there are religions that tell you to kill people of other religions. You can't say both those religions are equally
Right.
true.
Right.
You know, because like they're either one is true or they're both false.
Right. Right.
They can't all be true. That doesn't
Right.
make any sense.
Right.
Yeah. That's really good.
Yeah, it is
Did
good.
were you like a philosophy major at
Logic.
college? You're just,
I have too much time to think. That's
oh, it's so good. So good. I remember Pastor Timothy Keller talking about this, saying everyone's got exclusive beliefs. You know, if you think I'm the one who doesn't have exclusive beliefs, you know, your idea that there's whatever 300 million gods is an exclusive belief. That it doesn't matter, all things are okay. That's an exclusive belief. You're saying something to contrast something else.
Sure.
And so let's just say it, you know, there's nobody who can be completely open-minded that you have an exclusive belief. Because if you believe that all things are true, then Christianity isn't. So you're anti-Christian, right? So just say that. So I thought that was really interesting and helpful. So nobody gets to be on this elevated plane where they're more enlightened than everybody else. He talked about, kind of that we're all climbing the same mountain, or that image that it's like the four blind guys who are all feeling different parts of the elephant, and so they describe an elephant in a different way. If you think that's what we're all doing, then you believe that you have some high perch that you can look down and see that.
You're the one person that can see the whole elephant.
Yeah, it's kind of an arrogant statement that you can see it all. So if you're saying you're so humble that everyone's going towards the same God, it's actually a very arrogant thing to say, that you're on this high perch, you can see everything. So I thought that was interesting. But like you said, when they contradict,
I mean, fundamentally,
Yeah,
not culturally, not
Yeah.
from this time
Yeah.
period to that period. I mean, fundamentally,
Yeah.
these
Right.
are not the same.
where Christianity says that our God said, "I'll give my son for you," and radical Islam says, "You give your son for me."
Yeah,
I mean, that's so
right.
upside down. So they can't both be.
And the major point, so if you have all these religions to choose from, why pick Christianity? It's the only one that has, I would say, it's the only one that actually gives you like the sure the surest faith.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, everything else is based off what you do. And so then you're always wondering if you've done enough.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, to us as Christians, we don't look and say, oh, there's 1,000 religions, or there's 2,000, or there's 10,000 world religions. There are two. You're going to heaven or you're going to hell. You are a believer or you're not. You're getting saved by Jesus or you're going to try to save yourself and fail. That's it. That doesn't matter if you call yourself Islam or Hindu or Buddhist or Taoist or whatever. It doesn't matter. You are either being saved by Jesus or you're being saved by nobody.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it. One other way to look at it too is it's not like you're going to a buffet and you're just trying to choose the best religion. Like, oh, which one do I really like?
Or a scoop of this. And
Yeah, I'll
heap
take
of
a,
that,
that's
or-
right.
Yeah.
And that one makes me the most happy, or that one works the best for me. Like, what if the one that's the hardest, and in many ways, Christianity, Jesus says, pick up your cross and follow me. Like, your life might get worse when you start following me. I want to know which one is true.
Yeah.
Because just because it sounds nice or feels nice or seems to work for a while, I think in many ways Buddhism works great when it comes to meditation. There's a lot of like benefits for it.
Sure.
And so it can't just be what's the most beneficial. That's like saying, it's so me-centered.
Yeah.
But what is true? Is gravity true? If I walk off that cliff, am I going to fall off? That's true, whether I like it or not. And I think that's what I found for me. That's what I want to know. And so that's why I keep on even challenging my faith, testing my faith. Is this still true? And I keep coming to the belief it is.
Yeah, I think a big one for me is who would write this?
Yeah,
Like, who would write
crazy.
this? Like, give all your possessions to the poor, give all the glory to God. Don't take any pride in what you did.
Right.
Be ready to die. Be ready to suffer miserably. Be ready to leave your family.
Yeah.
Like, who would want this?
Yeah. Right.
For some reward that's just explained very vaguely as like, it's awesome. It's not even like 72 virgins. It's like, hey, it's going to be good. I
That's when you
promise.
know you have a man-made religion, right? 72 virgins and your
a
own
man-
plan. Also,
a
like,
man-made religion.
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. Go back to our original topic. Yeah, I think that's real. And then all of the embarrassing stories about the founders. Like,
Yeah.
if you're writing religion and Peter's one of the authors, like, wouldn't you tell Mark and the other, like, could you just take out that part where I
Yeah.
denied Jesus 3 times and caused curses on myself? And so there's no heroes in the Bible except for Jesus. Everybody fails. And that's so true. Again, back to the truth, because we all have failed. Like, there's nobody who can say, I've never met anybody when I ask them, if your whole life has been recorded, and they turned that into a movie, would you really want everybody to see everything you've ever done?
Oh, no.
And so that's what's so fascinating with the Bible. In many ways, that's what's happened. They've recorded it all. They laid it all out. They tell the truth about humanity, and God still loves us, and God still comes to rescue us. And it's remarkable.
And now that you say that, I mean, there aren't even any, like, because some people will view their faith as like this path of like almost enlightenment. Like, now that Jesus has saved us, we can ascend until we are like him. And so you're like constantly improving.
Sure.
But like King David, he sins a bunch once he gets old.
Right. Yeah.
Abraham, Moses, all these guys, they never like get better. They never like become more one with God and therefore more holy or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I might challenge that a little bit. I hope we're different people in some level, but it might be, the difference is you think less of yourself. You're not so self-obsessed. The difference is you think more about Jesus. And so if you're not thinking about yourself, you have room to love, and you're also willing to be honest. One of the signs I think that you're growing in faith is you realize how messed up you really are. Like, you thought, I was this much messed up before I became a Christian. A lot of times I talk to people who say, I don't really need Christianity because I'm not that bad of a person. Well, after you start looking at the glory of God and who Jesus was, you're like, man, I really do need Jesus.
Yeah.
So that's a sign of growth, is you realize how much you need it. Yeah.
I think it's also like it's just one of the best answers to sin and guilt. Like everyone has sin and guilt, and it's like, where does this come from? Because I feel like I'm pretty good-ish, you know.
David Foster Wallace. Have you ever heard of that name? He was an author, and he gave this great. Unfortunately, he took his own life. He's not a Christian, but he gave one of the best arguments for Christianity when he gave us a commencement speech at Kenyon College. You can find it on the internet. And he says, there is a good reason. Stop looking down on Christians or religious people, because everybody's going to worship something. And there's a very good reason to at least worship God, so you're not, everything else, he says, will eat you alive.
Yeah.
And he's just got that great line. It's true. I mean, worship money and you'll never have enough. Worship status, you'll never have enough status. Worship all these different things. Pleasure, you're never going to have enough pleasure. But God is the only thing you can worship that won't eat you alive. And I love that because, he knew it, although he never, maybe he did receive it. Maybe he did believe it, but he could see the value in it.
Yeah.
So not only is there a release from guilt and shame, but it gives you something to focus on and strive for that won't destroy you.
Yeah. And I the other thing that I always think of is if there's no religion, if none of them are true, if there's no God because there's no scientific evidence for God, then what are we all looking for? Yeah. Why do people keep looking generation after generation? No matter how much we learn and see and grow, we just keep looking. It's never enough. Like, what are we looking for? And why do we all have this inherent draw towards something else?
Yeah, because God has placed eternity in our hearts, like it says in Ecclesiastes. Another really powerful proof, I think, I just heard this amazing story. Do we have time to tell one more story? Go for it. All right. So I was listening to a podcast with John Mark Comer. He was a pastor out in Portland area, and his wife had a debilitating disease. They didn't really know what it was. They went to all the different types of doctors, more natural doctors and more, whatever, traditional doctors, those kind of things. And they couldn't figure it out. And she was like, it's just getting worse and worse and worse. And she found out at the same time, somebody came to her and said, are there any generational curses in your family? She's like, what are you talking about, generational curses? And you're like, I don't know. And at the same time, her brother said, did you know this story about our great-grandmother? Our great-grandmother was married to this diplomat in Mexico. And this diplomat had another wife that he put in an insane asylum because he didn't want her anymore. And this woman found this spiritist who made this curse on every firstborn daughter in her family would die young or get sick. And so this woman, her name is Tammy Comer, and she's like, that's so crazy. I don't know. But then she looked at her family tree, and every firstborn daughter in that whole family got sick or died young. And she's like, oh, but there's this one here that my aunt, she's of the firstborn in the family, and she's fine. And she got a call like the next day, like, she's getting sick and she's got this debilitating disease.
What?
And some of it was like this twitch in her face. It was like a neurological disease. And so they decided, this pastor, he's, pretty conservative pastor, like kind of our conservative pastor. He's like, I don't even have a category for this. If we go see somebody for this, like, I don't want a weird pastor who's going to do weird things. But they went and talked to a pastor who's dealt with generational curses. And she talks about how when she went to go meet with this guy, like her face started like spasming like crazy. Like it was getting, or like her disease was getting worse and worse as she was going to talk to this.
An exorcism.
Basically. And she said it was like almost like a contract where she went and talked to this pastor who's got experience, and he said, let's confess your sin. And so she confessed all of her sin in front of her husband, anything that she was holding back. And then they prayed that Jesus would remove the curse. And this was like 3-4 years ago. And that day her symptoms went away, and she's never had any more symptoms since. It was crazy. So, and I don't know, just that made me think like just reminded me that there are physical realities that we need doctors and all of that and scientists and all that, but there's also spiritual realm and we hear both in God's word. You know, Jesus Luke, one of the authors of the Gospels, was a doctor himself, and so there's more going on in this world than we think, and there is a real devil, there is real evil, there is real guilt, there is real shame, there is real idolatry, and there is a real devil who wants to take us away from our Savior. So I don't know. It's a powerful story. Again, I guess the more you hear about those things, you also are reminded about the power of the light, the power of Jesus. So, anyways, crazy. I don't know if that was on topic,
blown.
but it was interesting. It was an interesting story.
Yeah.
I think it's a good point. All right. That'll do it for us here. And as a reminder, as I wrote on my sticky note, if you enjoy our content, leave us a review so that we can reach out further into the interweb. If you don't enjoy our content, shut up. Keep listening anyway. We'll grow on you, we promise.
If you'd like to get a hold of us here at the Climbing Sycamores podcast, feel free to email bsadler@victoryofthelamb.com. bsadler@victoryofthelamb.com. If you like today's intro music, it's been brought to you by Andrew Lynch's song, My Name, Hello.